Hey everybody, it's Kyle. So today I want to do a quick video about the fact that I came across a guy recently who was a little bit complaining a little bit because he said, the more he does for his son on the autism spectrum, the more his wife lets him do, and the more she pulls away. And he was frustrated because he felt like the more he does, the more she expects. And he felt a little overwhelmed. And so I'm going to share with you today a little bit an experience I had, and I'm going to warn you right up front. This is a warning because I'm going to talk about my wife who passed away, and I might get a little bit emotional. So maybe you grab some tissue if you want to keep watching. But anyway, the reason I want to cover this is because I see this a lot in not just dads who are raising kids on the spectrum, but moms too. They feel like they put in all the effort and their spouse doesn't really help. And that can be long-term a struggle. It can create resentment. And so I want to share with you a little bit about an experience I had with my wife. So, let's see, my twins are 14 now. So I guess maybe 15 or so years ago, my wife got pregnant with our twins, who are now 14, obviously. And early on in the pregnancy, I had kind of a scary thought cross my mind. And typically when thoughts cross my mind, I usually just put them out of my mind, and if they don't come back, then I don't really pay attention, because we all have bad thoughts go through our minds periodically, and most of them don't happen. But this one kind of stuck around, and I kept putting it out of my mind, but it kept coming back. And usually when things like that happen to me, I pay attention. And this one was a horrible thought, and the thought was that my wife would not survive through childbirth with my twins. And so as you can imagine, that's a pretty scary thought. And the more I tried to put it out of my mind, the more it kept coming back. And it was making me real nervous. I'm not really the type that worries. I manage what I think pretty well, but I couldn't shake this. And with 6 months left, she was put on complete bed rest. And so that was another checkbox that I was going to lose her in childbirth. And with 6 weeks left, they took her into the hospital. And she was in the hospital for the last 6 weeks. And everything kept telling me that she wasn't going to survive childbirth. And so I'm not the kind to sit back and let life just happen to me. I like to experience a lot of joy and happiness, and I knew that I was going to need some sort of a plan to address this. And so I was really struggling through this whole thing. It was eating me up inside. And I was really fighting the urge to believe it, but deep down I believed it. And I'll never forget when they took her to the hospital. It was just another check in the box that this is going to happen. My wife's going to die in childbirth. And so I wanted my kids at the time, I had 4 sons, to be with her as much as possible. So, because, she wasn't going to be around, and I wanted them to get to know her as much as they could. So in the morning, I would take all the kids to school, and then I would go to work, and then at lunch, every day at lunch, I would take her lunch, and we'd have lunch together. And then I would go back to work, and then when the kids got out of school, I would go pick them all up, and then I would take all the kids up to see her every day, and we'd have dinner with her every day. And this happened every day. Lunch and dinner every day with her. And I was determined that if she was going to pass away, and I believe she was, that my kids were going to spend as much time as they could with her. And I would ask her a lot of questions about her life so they could hear her stories and get to know her as much as possible. And it was interesting to me because, in the past, I hate to say it, but I think I was a little selfish about things, and this would have bothered me to have to get up and take the kids to school, go to work, take her lunch every day, go back to work, go pick up all the kids, grab dinner, take it up to her. That would have bothered me in the past because that seemed like too much work and it seemed like I was being overburdened. But because of the situation, I was determined that they were going to get to see her and know her as much as possible. And I was suffering deeply during this time, but I couldn't really tell anybody, right? Who do you tell? You can't really tell her. I couldn't tell her she was going to die. I couldn't tell. I was just left all to myself through this experience. And I'm pretty good about hiding pain and suffering from other people. I'm kind of the guy that likes to manage my own deal. I don't want to make anybody else suffer through my experiences, so I kind of was keeping it all to myself. Well, with about a week left to go, my brother, he caught me. He saw me in a real vulnerable state, and he said, "Hey, what's going on with you?" And I like you normally do, I said, "No, I'm okay." And he's like, "No, something's happening." So I told him, "I think Shelly's going to die in childbirth." And after we kind of had some discussions, he said, "You know what, Kyle, maybe there's just a lesson you need to learn. And if you can learn that lesson, maybe she doesn't have to die. Maybe you can learn the lesson." So I started thinking, it gave me hope. And it made me excited to think that she might not pass away. And so I remember thinking, it's interesting because prior to this experience, when I would come home from work and there would be dishes in the sink or laundry that needed to be folded, I remember helping. I remember if I saw dishes in the sink, I would go do them, but it was more out of obligation. And while I was doing it, I would kind of seethe. I'm a little ashamed to say that, but while I was helping, while I was doing dishes or folding laundry or those kind of things, I would seethe inside. And I would be frustrated that she, what's she doing all day long? She's a stay-at-home mom. Why isn't this done, And that was my attitude. But during this experience, I noticed that everything I did was just based on pure love for her. And so I thought, you know what? Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the lesson I need to learn, that I need to quit doing things out of obligation and start doing things out of love. And, the good news is that lesson was learned very deeply during that time. And I really don't think there was any other way I could have learned that lesson other than to think that I would lose Shelly in childbirth. And I'll never forget a couple of weeks, well, it was actually a couple of months after she had given birth and she was home and, the twins were doing better, and she came and sat down by me on the couch one day and she said, "You know what? Something's different about you. I feel like you love me more." And I said, "Well, I kind of do." And she said, "What? Something's happened. What's going on?" And so, I told her that I thought she was going to die, and it had changed me deep down in my spirit. And it changed me to a point where I quit doing things out of obligation. And I started doing things because I loved her. And it changed the way I did dishes. When I got home and there was dishes in the sink, I wanted to do them because I knew that would be a way that I could show my love for her. Or if there were clothes that needed to be folded, those are the two things she didn't like to do. My wife was a really good homemaker, but there was a couple things she didn't like to do. And so folding clothes and doing dishes were two of them. And so I picked up those things and started doing them consistently out of just pure love. Not because I felt obligated or because I knew I should, but it was just because I loved her. And it changed our relationship dramatically. Frankly, I think it might have saved our relationship. That experience And so let's go back to the guy who was frustrated because the more he did, the more she expected his wife. And my advice is, and what I learned through this experience was very simple, and it's this: people cannot take advantage of you when you're doing things for the right reason. Okay? When you're doing things out of love or just plain service for people, when you're doing things because you want to, because it's who you are at your core, people can't take advantage of you. Now, if you don't want to do something for somebody, don't do it. But don't do it out of obligation. Figure out a way to do things in a spirit of love. And I promise you that your wife, as she sees you do that in the spirit of love, instead of seething like I was, she'll respond and she'll reciprocate. My wife reciprocated. And all spouses reciprocate. When you do things in a spirit of love, you cannot be taken advantage of. So hopefully that's helpful. Sorry for the tears. I can't hardly talk about my wife anymore without tearing up a little bit, because I kind of miss her. She passed away over a year ago, and I miss her. So it's tough for me to talk about her or to see pictures of her or any of those things without tearing up a little bit. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful. Dads, if you're frustrated because your wife doesn't seem to be helping, or don't do it out of obligation. Do things in a spirit of love. And if you'll do them in a spirit of love, nobody can take advantage of you. That's not just with your kids, but with your spouse, with your extended family, with friends. If you're doing things for them because you love them and because you care about them, you can't be taken advantage of. So hopefully that's helpful. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.